Hi everybody, welcome to another segment of Course in Miracles Applied. Today's topic is called the Circle of Atonement. It is very loosely based on the chapter in the text, which is 14.5, chapter 14, section 5, the Circle of Atonement. And if you put circle into the search engine, you get 28 results, and a good chunk of those, half of those, not quite half of those, are from this section, the Circle of Atonement. The circle is a kind of a symbol in the Course, and there are some beautiful, beautiful passages that involve this circle. And I felt that the circle also gives a very good visual representation of our journey. The graph that you see behind me is an attempt to make this process visual. However, the danger with all those graphs is that you get something stuck in your head and then it's not that. You know, the process isn't a graph. It's much more messy. It's always moving and back and forth between the ego and the Holy Spirit. It's not tidy. You know, it's fearful. You feel guilty. You feel the guilt. You feel some rays of forgiveness once in a while. But it's not a neat, nice circle. However, this graph does show our state of mind, in a sense. So we would go from the decision maker is right here. We're going from the inside, in one sense, to the outside, which is not equivalent to our journey. Our journey is more from the outside to the inside. So, there you go. We reached the limits of the graph, right? But I think this shows a couple of things. The first one is the truth, love, God, heaven, oneness is all encompassing, right? Everything that we do inside here, which is our process with the Course, is all enveloped in the truth, love, God, oneness, heaven. Nothing can be outside this. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God, right? So the peace of God is forever unchanging, unchangeable, eternal. It's always the same. There's no multitude. There's just oneness, joined as one, right? Oneness cannot be divided. Heaven is the awareness of perfect oneness, right? We have discussed in a previous segment that this is nothing we can even begin to grasp. So this will be our foundation. This will be this will surround everything we do. But we will rarely and barely touch on it because the process is within our mind, which is most of the time within the ego thought system. That is where our journey lies, embedded on this foundation of nothing happened. Right? The truth is true. Nothing else is true. Love cannot be divided. Oneness cannot be divided. God is all those things, and nothing more and nothing less. So that's the foundation of the circle that encloses everything, and the circle is within that embedded truth, and not outside of it. Okay. So the first part is where we begin, right? This is the center of the circle. And I would put the decision maker there, because that's where we are. I don't know if it's going to hold because there's a lot of chalk. Yeah. Decision maker does not want to be in the circle anymore. It wants to break out of the circle. Okay, so the center of this graph is the decision maker, and more precisely, the decision maker's wish to go home. Right? That is the wish of all of us. Otherwise, we would not be with the course. We would not read the course. We would not study the course. We would not do for years and years and years. Listen to Ken Wapnick's tapes. Read the course. Read other literature about the course. The wish to go home is within us. That is equivalent to the workbook lesson, I want the peace of God, right? Now, if we would only want that, we would have the peace of God, right? We talked about that many times. That's lesson 185. I want the peace of God. Basically, the wish to go home would say, I want the peace of God. Right? That is the baseline of our journey home. That is the engine that pushes us every day to read in the course, to practice it, to apply it, is that wish to go home. And in lesson 182, I will be still an instant and go home. Jesus talks about that he desires to go home so deeply, so unceasingly. His voice cries unto you to let him rest a while. Right, so that wish to go home is very strong in us. Like the force in Luke, right? However, as we said, as it says in lesson 185, to say these words, I want the peace of God, means nothing. To mean these words is everything, right? And we could see the journey of the course going from saying those words to meaning those words. In the beginning of our journey, we say those words, we don't mean them. At the very end, we will mean them, and then we will go home. We will have peace, right? The moment we mean, I want the peace of God 100%, we will go home. And our journey is from our present state, where we, even though we want the peace of God, there is a counterforce that opposes that wish, right? And you all guessed what this is because you looked on the graph, right? There is something at this very present moment. There's something in us that is stronger than this wish to go home, which in our case is the fear of returning. Right? We are afraid of going home. There was one segment, I did one segment called We're Going Toward Love, Not Wanting to Arrive. Right? We are going toward love, but part of us does not want to arrive there. And that is the dilemma us course students are in, whether we're aware of it or not. Most of the time, it is deep in the unconscious mind, that wish not to return. We have buried it, right? And then there's the sentence that says, you have buried truth in fear. You have buried truth in fear. And then we don't look at the truth because the fear is there. So we don't want to go near the fear, but the truth is buried in fear. It is hidden. Let me see if this comes up. Can I put in hidden? No. So we have hidden truth in fear. Anyway, we're going ahead of ourselves. Or I'm going ahead of myself. So we have the wish to go home, right? This is symbolized by those arrows going outward, right? We're pushing. We want to go home, right? I want the peace of God. We're pushing to move on that journey. The fear of returning is the counterforce. That would be the ego's domain, right? If the wish to go home is in our right mind, the fear of returning is in our wrong mind, right? And at this very moment, right now, the fear of returning is bigger than the wish to go home. Right? There's no doubt about it. And we can try to deny it, we can try to downplay it, but eventually we must realize, if I'm not home, something must be holding me back. And traditionally, we put that on God, right? We say God says we're not ready to go home, and we have to go through those trials and tribulations and such. But that's not the thought system of the Course. The Course says God isn't. There's nothing that stands in between you and the full awareness of love's presence, other than your wish. Your wish not to go home, which is based in that fear. Right, those blocks to the awareness of love's presence is fear. And as Jesus says, but what has no opposite, what does not exist cannot have an opposite, or something like that. What has no opposite doesn't exist. You know what I mean. The opposite of love is fear, but what is all-encompassing can have no opposite. So that is the ultimate line that frees us from it. But we're not there yet, right? We're still in the fear. So we have the wish to go home, we're pushing outward, and we have this fear of returning that holds us back. And that explains everything in our life. There is nothing excluded from this dynamic. Right? We have this wish to go home, and all of a sudden we feel terrified. This problem came up that takes up all of our time out of the blue. We feel depressed. We feel anxious. We feel upset. We feel angry with somebody. Right? That's all the fear of returning. There is this section in the fourth obstacle to peace in paragraph 6. It says, and that is when we look at this fear, right? It says, and now you stand in terror before what you swore never to look upon. Right? We swore to the ego never to look at that fear, never to question it. Right? Always striving, always having that wish to go home, but never questioning the fear that is the counterforce. As Jesus says in the gifts of God, fear is the counterfeit of joy. Right? The joy is in this wish to go home. There is a fragment of joy in there because the memory of God is included in this wish to go home. It pulls us from God. And when it pulls us from God, there must be this spark of joy that says, I want to go home, I'm ready to go home. I want to, as this song goes by Tom Jones, I want to feel and touch the green, green grass of home again. Right? The lawns of heaven, as Jesus talks about. that wish, that joy is within us, that pulls us toward God. And then, because we are afraid of returning home, but don't want to look at that, we think, what's happening? There's so many things in my life. I can't concentrate. I can't do the course. I have ADHD. And all the things we come up with, that is that fear of returning. Right? There is no exterior force in our lives. Everything is our force that we project outward, that then can push at us from without. Right? So in this obstacle it says, and now you stand in terror before what you swore never to look upon. Your eyes look down, remembering your promise to your friends. The loveliness of sin, the delicate appeal of guilt, the holy waxen image of death, and the fear of vengeance of the ego you swore in blood not to desert, all rise and bid you not to raise your eyes. Right? We don't want to look at this fear because we know hidden in that fear is the truth about ourselves, which is that we're love. That is hidden inside that fear. That's why we don't want to look at it. So the first part of reversing our journey with the ego, which is away from truth, Jesus tells us, listen, you have this wish to go home, right? Which that is the memory of God pulling you toward God. But then you have the fear of returning, and it is crucial to become fully aware of that fear. We cannot theoretically look at fear. Unfortunately, we must look at it, because if we don't look at it, we will not get to the truth. If we stay away from this fear, we will not get back to the truth. Because the fear is there to hide it. We have hidden truth in fear. For you realize that if you look on this and let the veil be lifted, they, sin, guilt, and fear, will be gone forever. All of your friends and protectors and your home will vanish. Nothing that you remember now will you remember. Right? But this fear is the counterforce to this wish to go home. And it is really important. I think it's one of the most important steps in the course to acknowledge that fear. And the fear can come it has 1,000 faces. Right? The course says everything you think you feel is nothing but fear. But the ego splinters it off and subdivides it and fragments it so that we don't see it as fear. Because if we would see it as fear, we would ask for help much sooner. But we have all those other emotions. And Jesus says you only have two emotions, love and fear. Right? All the emotions that aren't love is fear. And that is the fear of returning. We're not afraid of spiders. We're afraid to return home. Right? The ego just pushes out that fear and says, no, you're afraid of something in the world. Because if we're afraid of something in the world and we're trying to handle that with behavioral therapy or anything like that, or overcoming that fear in the outside, we will never get to the purpose of it, which is the fear of returning. This is the thing that lets us not return. Right? So in one sense in the course, Jesus urges us to, you must look at that. At some point in the course, you must look at that fear, because the truth is hidden in it. So at this very moment, what we can do with Jesus and say, listen, I have this wish to go home. I understand that. I want the peace of God, right? But I'm not there. So there must be something within me that is counteracting this wish to go home, which I now realize is the fear of returning home. And just to acknowledge that and have a talk with Jesus about it, right? That everything I do in my life that isn't complete love, I do because I'm afraid to go home. As lofty and as pretty as it might be. If there's only fear and love, there's only going home or staying where we are. There's nothing in between. I either want to go home or I'm afraid to go home. Those are the two states of mind, plain and simple, very simple, so simple. We want to make it more complicated. We say, no, but what about that? No, there's no but about that. It is either the wish to go home or the counterforce is the fear of going home. Right? There's nothing in between. There's nothing else other than that. And if we look at our lives in that way, that I'm either acting on this wish to go home or I'm acting on the fear of returning. Everything that isn't that wish to go home, that has that little spark of joy in it, like I'm going home, I'm on my way home, right? Everything that isn't that is fear, which is the fear of returning home. And right now it's kind of like a seesaw. You know, you have the seesaw. The wish to return is here. The fear of returning is more, right? In the course process, if we look enough at that fear of returning and go to the next step, which is the cause for that fear, eventually the belief, the wish to go home will be stronger than the fear of returning. And that's when we will make strides in progress and leap into God's arms, which right now we're too afraid of. Right? We are afraid of leaping into God's arms because otherwise we would be there. Our awareness would be home with God. If that fear of returning wouldn't be stronger, right? And the process with the course is to slowly level it out and then ever so slightly gain, right? This wish really doesn't change. The wish is very strong, but the fear lessens. Once the fear lessens, automatically the wish will come up. This is the same principle as we're not going toward love, we're looking at the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. We don't have to actively work on that wish to go home. Nothing needs to be done with this wish to go home. I don't have to affirm, I want to go home, I want to go home, I want to go home, I want to strengthen that wish to go home in me. No, don't do it. It doesn't hurt, but it doesn't help. That wish is there. It is shining like a bright beacon within us. Right? It will pull us toward God. There's no force that can stop it except for the fear of returning. Like if you're walking with your friend towards a goal, let's say you're going to Vegas. You're on your way to Vegas, you want to go to Vegas and your friend doesn't want to go. Your wish to go to Vegas is 100%. Your friend is fear of going to Vegas because what happened last time is 120%. That means he stalls, she stalls, you're not going. Right? You don't have to worry about your wish to go to Vegas. It's there. You have to worry about your friend. Right? So we don't have to worry about increasing the wish to go home. there's no work to be done there. It will automatically increase once the fear is down. The wish automatically increases. There's no work to be done at all. That is part of the chapter, you need do nothing. Right? You need do nothing about this wish to go home. We don't have to make it pretty. We don't have to water it like the symbol of the water. We're watering the seed. There's nothing we need to do on a positive sense. We need to work on the positive sense in order to look at this fear of returning. That's the only reason we need the positive in the course. All those beautiful passages are there so that we're equipped to look at this fear of returning, right? To look at that, the loveliness of sin, the delicate appeal of guilt, and the holy waxen image of death. Right? That's what we look at. Okay. So clear that we have this wish to go home. Everything in our lives that does not reflect that wish, which is 90% of it, 99.99%, is the fear of returning. There's nothing else. And if we look at our lives, we can see this fully developed in action every day. Right? We either want to go home or we don't. That's it. So, and then we look at that, we look at the fear, we realize all of this, all of those emotions is really fear, the fear of returning. And then eventually we come to a point where we ask the question, which is a very legitimate question, why? Right? Why am I so afraid to return? There's those two lines, we have read them so many times. I think they're already a little bit faded in the web version because we looked at it so many times. It says, future loss is not your fear, but present joining is your dread. Right? We look at that, we realize, for me to join with Jesus right now, that's what my fear is about. Right? Joining with the Holy Spirit right now in my mind, not to get a parking space. The parking space is still within my fear is too big to ask the Holy Spirit internally to look at my guilt with me. That's why I want the Holy Spirit to guide me in the world, because my fear of returning is too big, and I'm kind of sneaking in from the back, right? That's a technique that we all use. Everybody uses it. We use it. I used it to get into the door with the Holy Spirit. Right? I say, please help me with this job. Please help me with this person. Please help me with my money, with my health, with guidance and such. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. In fact, it's really good to do that. Eventually, we will come to the point where we say, okay, the actual purpose of the Holy Spirit is this. Right? The fear of returning. And then we ask the question, eventually we ask the question, why am I so afraid to return? Why am I so afraid to join with Jesus? Because we have to think about it. How many minutes a day are we connected to Jesus? Meaning, we feel the joy, we feel the love, we feel the peace, and there's complete absence of fear, complete absence of any kind of worries. How many minutes a day do we experience that? Right? That's that. The rest of the day is this. So the rest of the day we spend in this fear of returning. And the more we progress with the course, the more all those other little emotions become this one, where we experience this fear of returning consistently. It's not fun. Right? We don't experience any other emotions for a while other than short bursts of love and light and fear. Right? And we think, oh, the Course is not working. The Course is working perfectly. Because the whole Course leads to that we can see this, right? See this fear of returning. It says, oh, I'm not home because I'm afraid. I'm not because I'm a bad student. I don't look at the Course for a week because I'm a bad student. I'm afraid of returning. Now it makes sense, right? And then eventually, at some point, we will go to the next step, which is this question that we ask Jesus. Why is it that I'm so afraid of returning home? And that question is the end of the ego. It's the beginning of the end of the ego. Because that question is something the ego would never allow us to go even near it. In chapter 27, section 7, he says in paragraph 7, of one thing you were sure, of all the many causes you perceived as bringing pain and suffering to you, or fear, your guilt was not among them. We have a tendency, and when we look back on our path with the Course, we recognize we have a tendency not to think of guilt as the cause of all of our problems, the cause of of all the world's problems. Anything in the world that is stressful, that is distress, that is war, that is conflict, that is unequal treatment, that is victimization, anything in the world or in our personal world or in our mind, we were sure guilt is not the cause. And Jesus says guilt is 100% the cause of all your issues, including the biggest one. The sum of all sums of your issues is the fear of returning. That is your biggest issue in this world. The cause of that biggest issue that you have, the only issue you have, is the fear of returning. The cause of all of that is your belief in guilt. And the ego says, of all the many causes you perceived as bringing pain and suffering to you, I guarantee you guilt is not among them. The ego says, don't look there. You can look outside as the cause for your problems. Oh yeah, I'm really not well off because the doctor did this and the economy did that and my neighbor did that and all the people did all of this, right? Their guilt is the cause for my suffering. But Jesus says, of all the many causes you perceived as bringing pain and suffering to you, your guilt was not among them, nor did you in any way request them for yourself. Right? So staying with this model, the question that we ask, why is it that I'm afraid to return home? And this is not a rhetorical question. This is a very deep question that we should meditate on. This is the only question we really need to meditate on. Why am I so afraid to go home to God, to my home? Why am I so afraid to enter the space that is me, that is my space, that is my home, my love, my heaven, my truth, my oneness? Why am I so afraid to return there? Right? And it's not even about the answer. It's not about, oh, guilt is the answer. It's really what this question does is open up the whole ego thought system. We question the ego when we question this. Why am I afraid of returning? And the ego has no answer to that. The ego wouldn't even acknowledge to us that we're afraid of returning home. The ego says, no, you're afraid of spiders, or you're afraid of the economy collapsing, or you're afraid of a health issue, or your partner leaving, or you dying. Right? That's what you're afraid of. And Jesus says, no, you're not afraid of dying. You're afraid of returning home. You're afraid of joining with me, Jesus says. It's very personal. You can make it very, very personal. You're afraid to join with me. And then we can ask Jesus, why am I so afraid to join with you? And Jesus says, because you are so guilty. You think you are so guilty. You are so ashamed of yourself that you think when you return, you will die. Instantly, immediately, there is no question about it in your mind that when you return home, you will die. You will cease to exist. I can't find it now. It's in chapter 13. I think chapter 13, section 3. Right? Under the ego's dark foundation is the memory of God. And it is of this that you are really afraid. For this memory would instantly restore you to your proper place, and it is this place that you have sought to leave. The shame we experience, the guilt and the shame and this belief in this, our sinfulness, is so strong that that generates this fear of returning home. Right? We think we will die if we return. Your fear of attack is nothing compared to your fear of love. You realize that by removing the dark cloud that obscures it, your love for your Father would impel you to answer his call and leap into heaven. You believe that attack is salvation because it would prevent you from this. For still deeper than the ego's foundation, and much stronger than it will ever be, is your intense and burning love of God and his for you. This is what you really want to hide. We want to hide this because we are so ashamed. Right? We don't want to look at that guilt. We don't want to look at that shame, because looking at it means re-experiencing it. We can't look at it from a distance. We have to re-experience it, re-evaluate it. While we're in it, while we're experiencing this shameful self, this guilty self, we ask Jesus, can this be true? Can I really be guilty? And Jesus says no, because love doesn't change, right? The oneness of heaven cannot be divided. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. You cannot leave the oneness of heaven. That's why there's no cause for sin. But it doesn't go anywhere if we just theoretically say that, right? To say these words is nothing. To mean these words is everything. So we experience a fear. We ask the question, why am I so afraid? The answer is because you're so ashamed. You are so ashamed that you think God will strike you down. Your little self, your personality, everything will be gone. You will be gone. You will not only die, you will be annihilated. And that all comes from our guilt, which is that shame over what we think we did to God. Right? So that's where that leads us to. The pushback for our wish to go home is the fear of returning, and the fear of returning is because of our belief in guilt, that shame, that belief in sin. Right? And that is what the Course leads us toward to look upon. And we look at it with forgiveness. Right? So encapsulating beyond guilt is where forgiveness waits. Right? But we can't reach it when we stay on this side of it. We cannot reach forgiveness, the miracle, the reflection of love, the memory of God, the Holy Spirit, when we stay on this side of guilt. At one point, one way, shape, or form, we must pass through that final veil. Right? That is that belief in that shameful part of us. And enveloping all of it is forgiveness, and in the Course it's the process of atonement. The atonement is not really at-one-ment as in spiritual circles. Atonement is nothing real can be threatened. Nothing real can be changed. God's love cannot change. There is no sin. Sin is impossible. If sin is impossible, there cannot be any shame over anything you have done because you have not done anything. If there's no guilt, there cannot be any fear because the cause for fear is guilt, and then this wish to go home is laid bare in front of us. Within us, all of a sudden it rises up within us, this wish to go home. We will cry, we will weep, we will see the beauty in others, and we will know we're on our path home. Nothing can stop us. Right? We will very slowly, as our fear lessens, as our shame lessens, will be pulled toward God. And in this graph, which is the miracle, which is hard to read, this is called miracle right here. So we would be lost, right, if the wish to go home would not be connected to the forgiveness. And that is very close to the love and the truth of heaven, right? We would be lost in this fear, solid guilt. How can we possibly pass through that? Right? That's why this is here. There's a connection between this wish to go home, because the wish to go home is the memory of God, and the memory of God is forgiveness, because forgiveness says nothing happened. The love and oneness of God is unchanged and unchangeable. Right? The atonement has been fulfilled the second the belief in separation was considered. That's the end of it. Right? Nothing happened. So this miracle is always with us. The wish to go home always connects us to forgiveness. And what we do, the process would be to look at this fear, ask the question, why am I so afraid? Look at the guilt and always have Jesus with us. Right? Always ask Jesus, the Holy Spirit, to look at this together. The miracle in the Course says the miracle restores to cause its function of causation. Right? Causation is the mind. The mind is the cause. The mind is the mind that believes in guilt. The miracle pulls us up here and says, your guilt is what the problem is. Right? The miracle in one sense just lifts the veil and lets us look at the ego thought system. That's why it is a course in miracles. The miracle takes the veil and lets us look at all this. Right? If without the miracle, it would be hidden, because its function is to hide. Right? It's all hidden within us. We have no clue what's going on. We think the world has an impact on us. The miracle says, no, you have an impact on you. Your decision, your belief in fear, your belief in guilt as the cause for fear, that is what the problem is, not the outside world. That's the miracle. So the miracle lifts the veil so we can look at the ego. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't make the ego better. Right? We must lose our strong belief in sin, in our own sinfulness. We must lose our strong belief that we are the guilty ones, that we have actually done something to the oneness of heaven. We must give that up ourselves, and we give it up with the help of this circle of atonement that the Course talks about, right? We give it up through looking with forgiveness onto our guilt, right? The fear is our barometer. We're like, wow, I'm afraid. Why am I afraid? I'm so afraid because I feel so guilty. And beyond the guilt is that thought of forgiveness, that circle of forgiveness that surrounds it, that we can access and say, Jesus, please look at this guilt with me. Look at this deep belief in guilt with me. I want to loosen that up. I don't want to believe in my own guilt anymore. For a while, we will go back and forth between guilt and fear, guilt and fear. Once in a while, this wish to go home will come through. We're like, oh my God, it feels good. And then we go right back into the fear. And it's going to be a journey between the two, between the questioning guilt, questioning fear. And what that entails, unfortunately, is questioning our own self. Because our self, as we see ourselves right now, is this, right? We are the ones that believe in this sinful self. Then now we're afraid. So that self is very, very married to this unholy trinity of sin, guilt, and fear. So when we start to question this guilt within us, we also question by default this self, which is scary, right? But it's only scary while we believe in guilt. So it always comes back to that, right? To that belief in guilt. There's this beautiful, and everybody knows this forgotten song, right? And it really actually talks about a circle. And we can kind of visualize it now with this graph a little bit. In one sense, you can imagine it that the wish to go home is within us, right? That's the motor, the engine. But forgiveness, this golden circle of forgiveness that lies just below the oneness of heaven, right? This golden circle of forgiveness shines on everything that we bring to it, right? It's this golden light. And if we bring this circle of fear, this circle of guilt to it, it must dissolve it. So it looks like the world disappears. But the world isn't disappearing. It's the guilt that we have placed onto the world that disappears. So it says here, beyond the body, beyond the sun and stars, past everything you see and yet somehow familiar, is an arc of golden light that stretches as you look into a great and shining circle, right? That's that circle of forgiveness, right? And all the circle fills with light before your eyes. So once the guilt is gone, the fear is gone, this circle of forgiveness will fill our whole mind. The edges of the circle disappear, and what is in it is no longer contained at all. So at first, the edges of those edges will disappear. between sin and guilt, and then the edge between guilt and forgiveness, because the guilt will melt away, and what will stay is that circle of forgiveness, right? And all the circle fills with light before your eyes. The edges of the circle disappear, and what is in it is no longer contained at all, right? What is in it is no longer contained. It's gone, right? The light expands and covers everything, extending to infinity, forever shining, and with no break or limit anywhere, right? All those rings will disappear, and the wish to go home, the decision maker, the blue dot, will cross from this golden circle. The awareness will return to the oneness of heaven. The light expands and covers everything, extending to infinity, forever shining, and with no break or limit anywhere. Within it, everything is joined in perfect continuity. Nor is it possible to imagine that anything could be outside, for there's nowhere that this light is not. Right? The only confinement to this light is fear. The fear comes from our belief in guilt. Once that's gone, there will not be a limit to this light. This is the vision of the Son of God, whom you know well. He is the sight of him who knows his Father. He is the memory of what you are, a part of this, with all of it within, and joined to all as surely as all is joined in you. Accept the vision that can show you this, and not the body. You know the ancient song and know it well. Nothing will ever be as dear to you as is this ancient hymn of love the Son of God sings to his Father still. And now the blind can see, for that same song they sing in honor of their Creator gives praise to them as well. The blindness that they have made will not withstand the memory of this song, and they will look upon the vision of the Son of God, remembering who he is they sing of. What is a miracle but this remembering? And who is there in whom this memory lies not? The light in one awakens it all, and when you see it in your brother, you are remembering for everyone. Thanks, everybody.